Mafia boss smelled her and froze. "Don't let her leave." Then he turned off all the security cameras. The whispers followed Rose Carter through the restaurant for weeks after the incident, like the lingering notes of her grandmother's perfume that had sparked it all. Rose's shift at Aurelio's began like any other Wednesday evening, her chemistry textbooks tucked safely in her locker, while she navigated between pristine white tablecloths with practiced grace. The restaurant's crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light across the faces of Los Angeles elite who never spared her a second glance. The perfume bottle sat on her dresser that morning, an amber glass vessel with intricate engravings that caught the light like trapped fireflies. Her grandmother had pressed it into her palm 3 months ago, blue veins mapping frail skin, whispering, "For special occasions," before Alzheimer's stole the story behind the gift. Tonight qualified as special. Her forensic toxicology professor had awarded her research grant proposal top marks, a small victory in the endless battle to keep her grandmother in private care. Rose had dabbed the perfume behind her ears, at her wrists, its unfamiliar notes warming against her skin throughout her shift. The private dining room had been reserved for Mr. West and Associates, the staff code for the untouchable guests whose generous tips came with implicit instructions to forget their faces. Rose moved efficiently between kitchen and dining room, the weight of crystal wine glasses balanced expertly in her hands. He arrived at precisely 8, flanked by men whose tailored suits couldn't quite disguise the angular outlines beneath. Robert West commanded the room without raising his voice, dark eyes cataloging every exit with mechanical precision, while he nodded at deferential greetings. Rose approached with the wine selection, practiced script ready on her lips when West froze mid-sentence. His nostrils flared slightly, head turning with predatory slowness to find the source of a scent that had cleaved through his composure like a blade. Their eyes met across polished mahogany, and something ancient and territorial flashed across his face before he controlled it. "Don't let her leave," he instructed the nearest guard, voice low, but carrying in the sudden silence as he rose from his chair. West moved with deliberate calm toward the security panel near the private entrance, fingers dancing across the keypad before the tiny red recording lights blinked out one by one. The room held its collective breath, conversation suspended in the vacuum left behind. "Everyone out," he ordered, not bothering to look as his associates exchanged glances before filing silently through the door. "Except you," he added, eyes never leaving Rose's face as her pulse hammered against the delicate skin where the perfume bloomed. "That scent doesn't belong to you," West stated flatly, circling her with measured steps that brought him close enough for her to catch the expensive notes of his cologne. "It belongs to my family, crafted for our bloodline alone by a perfumer who died 30 years ago." Rose clutched her serving tray like a shield, mind racing through possible escapes while her voice remained steady. "It was my grandmother's, her only gift before Alzheimer's took her memories," she replied, watching his expression shift minutely at the mention of the disease. "Your grandmother's name?" he asked, stopping his circular path to stand before her, hands clasped behind his back in a pose that somehow conveyed both patience and imminent danger. The question hung between them like a live wire. "Evelyn Carter," Rose answered, and watched as recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by something more complex, a bitter understanding that reshaped his perception of her between one heartbeat and the next. "Evelyn West before she fled with my brother's child," he replied, his voice a controlled tempest. "Which makes you my niece, and explains why you're carrying our family's scent signature." The restaurant seemed to recede around them, ambient noise fading beneath the thundering of Rose's heartbeat as she processed his words. Family lore had always painted her grandmother as a woman who'd escaped an unhappy marriage, never a fugitive from criminal royalty. "My security team has already traced your address, verified your identity, and confirmed your grandmother's condition," West continued, watching her reaction with clinical detachment. "What they cannot explain is why you're working as a waitress when your education suggests far greater potential." Rose squared her shoulders, refusing to be diminished by his scrutiny or intimidated by his power. "Forensic chemistry degrees in medical care for dementia patients aren't free," she stated, her voice carrying an edge of defiance that made his eyebrows rise fractionally. His lips curved slightly upward, not quite a smile but something adjacent to approval. "Family takes care of family," he declared, as if reciting scripture. "Even family that was stolen from us and denied their birthright." "I wasn't stolen or denied anything," Rose countered, setting down her serving tray with deliberate care. "I was raised by a loving mother and grandmother who worked honest jobs to give me opportunities. not obligations to a criminal enterprise. A dangerous gleam flickered in West's eyes, but his voice remained perfectly modulated. Criminal is such a crude simplification of a complex family business with international interests, diplomatic connections, and generational loyalty, he replied, each word precisely chosen. Rose felt the ground shifting beneath her feet as West pressed a buzzer, summoning a silver-haired man who appeared instantly with a leather portfolio. This contains documentation of your grandmother's true identity, marriage certificate to my brother Anthony, and birth certificate of your mother, Caroline. The folder felt impossibly heavy in Rose's hands as she opened it, confronting photographs of a younger Evelyn draped in jewels beside a striking man with West's jawline and eyes. This proves nothing except that she chose to leave this world behind, she whispered, fighting to maintain composure. It proves you have choices now, West replied, reaching inside his jacket to produce a business card embossed with nothing but a phone number. Your grandmother needs specialized care, and you need research opportunities beyond what your university can provide. Rose's fingers closed around the card reflexively as West continued, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. I have access to experimental treatments for Alzheimer's patients, medical facilities with staff-to-patient ratios your student loans could never afford, and laboratories that would value your expertise in chemical analysis. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrible in equal measure. And what would you expect in return for such generosity? Rose asked, already knowing the answer would alter her life irrevocably. Only what family rightfully expects: loyalty, discretion, and the occasional consultation in your field of expertise, West replied, his gaze never wavering from hers. Starting with recreating the perfume your grandmother wears, which we use to identify those under our protection. Rose thought of her grandmother's deteriorating condition, the mounting medical bills, and the research possibilities that had always seemed just beyond her reach. I'll need time to consider, she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. West inclined his head in what appeared to be genuine respect. 24 hours, he conceded, retrieving his phone to make arrangements. My driver will take you home tonight and collect you tomorrow evening, either to begin our arrangement or to hear your refusal. And if I refuse? Rose asked, needing to understand the boundaries of this unexpected choice. He regarded her with something between amusement and regret. Then, you remain a Carter instead of a West, working double shifts to pay for inadequate care while your grandmother's memories vanish completely, he answered simply. We won't interfere with the life you choose. Rose's apartment felt alien that night, its familiar corners suddenly suspect, as she processed the evening's revelations. The perfume bottle gleamed accusingly from her dresser, no longer a simple heirloom but a bloodline signature, a chemical thread connecting her to a world she'd never known existed. Her grandmother slept peacefully in the adjacent bedroom, unaware that her granddaughter now stood at the intersection of two irreconcilable futures. Rose pulled out her laptop, searching for information on the West family, with growing dread, as fragments of news articles painted a picture of legitimate business interests, thinly veiling suspected criminal activities. Dawn broke, as Rose finally closed her computer, having found enough to understand the scale of the organization she was being invited to join. The pharmaceutical division alone could provide her grandmother with cutting-edge treatments, while their research facilities offered resources beyond what academia could ever provide. You were right to run, she whispered to her sleeping grandmother, gently smoothing a silver strand of hair from her forehead. And I understand why you never told us, but what choice do I have now when your care is at stake? The next evening arrived with merciless promptness, a black sedan idling outside her apartment complex, exactly 24 hours after their first encounter. The driver, expressionless in his tailored suit, opened the door without comment as Rose approached with her decision already made. West's estate sprawled across the Hollywood Hills, a modernist fortress of glass and concrete overlooking the city he controlled. Rose was escorted through security measures disguised as architectural features, recognizing the chemical sensors that likely detected weapons, recording devices, and perhaps even stress pheromones. Welcome to your family home. West greeted her in a vast living room where floor-to-ceiling windows framed Los Angeles like a living painting. I take it your presence indicates acceptance of my offer. Conditional acceptance, Rose clarified, handing him a document she'd prepared outlining her terms. I'll consult on chemical matters only, with full access to Alzheimer's treatment programs for my grandmother, but I won't participate in anything that directly harms others. West scanned the document, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. A negotiator, he noted with what sounded like genuine appreciation. Anthony would have approved. He always valued principle, even when it complicated matters. Tell me about him, Rose said, the question escaping before she could contain her curiosity about the father her mother had never known. My mother died believing her father had abandoned them both. A shadow passed across West's features, transforming him briefly into something more human than the calculated criminal she'd anticipated. Anthony was my older brother, my mentor, and the better man between us, he admitted, gesturing for her to sit. His death wasn't abandonment. It was murder by rivals who never suspected he had a pregnant wife hidden away for protection. The revelation about her uncle's murder left Rose reeling, her world tilting on its axis as West led her through the labyrinthine mansion. Family photos lined one hallway, her mother's absence a conspicuous void in the carefully preserved timeline of West Dynasty power. Your laboratory, West announced, unveiling a state-of-the-art facility that made her university equipment seem like children's toys. The pristine counters held specialized instruments she'd only read about in journals, chemicals organized with military precision along temperature-controlled storage units. Rose approached a central workstation where her grandmother's perfume bottle sat alongside chemical analysis results. The molecular structure displayed on a nearby screen revealed compounds she'd never encountered in commercial fragrances, synthetic markers unique to what West called their scent signature. The original formula died with our perfumer, West explained, his voice carrying a rare note of reverence. Your grandmother's bottle contains one of the last authentic batches, which we need you to reverse engineer for current application. A team of white-coated assistants materialized at West's gesture, introductions flowing in a blur of credentials that would have impressed Rose's academic advisors. These weren't street thugs, but PhDs in organic chemistry, biochemistry, and neurological sciences, brilliant minds serving a shadow empire. We'll begin moving your grandmother tomorrow, West continued, leading her to a holographic display of a medical facility that resembled a luxury resort more than a healthcare center. Dr. Pearson heads our Alzheimer's research division and has already reviewed her case files. Rose's fingers trembled slightly as she swiped through treatment protocols, far beyond standard care guidelines. These aren't FDA approved, she noted, recognizing experimental compounds that had shown promise in international trials, but remained unavailable in American markets. The West family doesn't recognize artificial boundaries when it comes to medical innovation, her uncle replied with calculated precision. Our patients receive treatments based on efficacy, not regulatory timelines. The tour concluded at a suite of rooms prepared for her temporary residence, decorated with unsettling accuracy to match her personal aesthetic. Someone had studied her, anticipated her needs with the same thoroughness that characterizes both scientific inquiry and predatory surveillance. You'll find everything you need here, West said, gesturing toward a closet filled with clothes in her size. Security protocols require you to remain on the estate until we've established trust parameters and completed your integration briefing. Rose crossed to the window, taking in the panoramic view of Los Angeles spread below, like a circuit board of lights and shadows. Am I a guest or a prisoner? She asked, the question hanging between them like smoke. West's expression remained unreadable as he moved toward the door. That depends entirely on your perspective and cooperation, he replied, his tone neither threatening nor reassuring. Family is both sanctuary and obligation. The door closed with the whisper of expensive engineering, leaving Rose alone with her thoughts and the weight of choices made for survival rather than virtue. She removed her grandmother's perfume from her pocket, inhaling the complex notes that had rewritten her destiny. Beyond the windows, darkness settled over Los Angeles like a velvet shroud, obscuring the boundary lines between legal and criminal, moral and necessary. Rose pressed her palm against the cool glass, wondering which side of that invisible divide she now occupied. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation, revealing a young woman with alert eyes and the graceful efficiency of someone trained for service. Mr. West thought you might need assistance settling in, she offered, her accent placing her origins somewhere in Eastern Europe. Rose's first week at the West estate established a rhythm of structured freedom, her days divided between laboratory work on the perfume formula and supervised visits with her grandmother at the private medical facility. The security detail shadowing her movements maintained a respectful distance, but never fully disappeared. Dr. Pearson's team had already implemented an aggressive treatment protocol for her grandmother, combining cognitive therapy with pharmaceutical interventions unavailable through conventional channels. Within days, Rose noticed subtle improvements in Evelyn's mental clarity, fleeting moments of recognition that both elated and terrified her. She asked about your grandfather this morning, Dr. Enal. Pearson reported, reviewing neural imaging scans that showed increased activity in memory centers previously deemed dormant. It's the first time she's mentioned Anthony in our sessions. The laboratory work provided both challenge and refuge. Rose's expertise in chemical forensics perfectly suited to deconstructing the perfume's complex formula. Each component revealed itself grudgingly under her analysis, some requiring specialized equipment flown in from European suppliers overnight. West visited the lab infrequently, but always without warning, his presence immediately altering the atmosphere as staff straightened imperceptibly. He would stand silently observing her work, occasionally asking questions that revealed surprising technical knowledge of chemical properties and interactions. The core compound has a unique molecular structure, Rose explained during one such visit, indicating a three-dimensional model rotating on her screen. It's synthesized from a botanical source I can't identify in any standard reference database. West nodded, unsurprised by her discovery. The primary ingredient comes from an orchid variant our perfumer cultivated specifically for us, grown exclusively at our property in Northern California, he revealed, the first piece of information he'd volunteered without prompting. Rose cataloged this new information, adding it to her growing mental dossier on the West operations. I'll need samples of the original plant to complete an authentic recreation, she stated, testing the boundaries of her restricted movement within the organization. A ghost of approval flickered across West's features as he made a note on his phone. Arrangements will be made, he confirmed, studying her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to assess not just her words, but the calculations behind them. Your grandmother has been asking for you. The medical wing existed in stark contrast to the business operations she'd glimpsed, its atmosphere one of genuine compassion rather than strategic advantage. Nurses greeted Evelyn by name, their interactions characterized by patience and dignity rarely found in conventional care facilities. Rose found her grandmother in a sunlit garden room, arranging flowers with focused determination that had been absent for months. They smell like the ones your grandfather planted at our first house, Evelyn explained, her voice clearer than Rose had heard in years. The breakthrough sent Rose back to her laboratory with renewed purpose, working through the night to isolate compounds that might explain the cognitive improvement. Her analysis revealed trace elements in the perfume that potentially stimulated neural pathways associated with memory retrieval. West discovered her there at dawn, surrounded by data printouts and simulation models, her exhaustion evident, but determination undiminished. You found something, he observed. Not a question, but a statement of fact, as he scanned her notes with practiced efficiency. The perfume isn't just a family signature, Rose explained, highlighting molecular structures on her screen. It contains compounds that interact with memory centers in the brain, possibly why my grandmother experienced clarity when I wore it around her. West absorbed this information with inscrutable calm, but his stillness carried the weight of significant realization. Our perfumer was decades ahead of neurological science, he finally said, reaching for his phone. This changes the parameters of your project considerably. 2 months into her residence at the West Estate, Rose found herself admitted to the inner circles of the family operation with calculated incrementalism. Security clearances expanded, doors previously locked now recognized her biometric signatures, and staff increasingly deferred to her directives regarding laboratory protocols. The cognitive enhancer discovered in her grandmother's perfume had become the focus of an accelerated research initiative, with West allocating resources that would have made her university department head weep with envy. Rose supervised a team of neurochemists adapting the compound for therapeutic applications, their progress monitored by investors she never met, but whose influence manifested in midnight deliveries of equipment and priority access to clinical trial data. Your grandmother's case has been classified as exceptional response, Dr. Pearson reported during their weekly meeting, presenting brain scans showing remarkable neural regeneration patterns. She's recovering memories from 50 years ago with contextual awareness that defies our standard prognosis models. Rose's success in the laboratory earned her conditional trust within the organization, though West maintained certain boundaries with unwavering discipline. Financial operations, enforcement protocols, and territorial negotiations remained firmly beyond her clearance level, mentioned only in conversations that ceased when she entered rooms. The Takahashi shipment arrives Thursday, she overheard one afternoon, the discussion abruptly shifting to weather predictions as she approached the strategy room with laboratory results. The speaker's eyes met hers with neither apology nor explanation, simply acknowledging the compartmentalization that defined her position. West's relationship with Rose evolved into something resembling mentorship, their interactions characterized by professional respect, layered over unspoken familial connection. He began inviting her to certain business dinners, introducing her as our pharmaceutical research director to associates whose polished veneers barely concealed predatory instincts. They respect expertise and results above all else, West advised before her first major presentation to the family's inner council. Show them the market applications of your grandmother's formula, not the science behind it. Wealth motivates more reliably than intellectual curiosity. Rose delivered her findings with clinical detachment, demonstrating how the memory-enhancing compound could be modified for controlled pharmaceutical application. The room of immaculately dressed power brokers transformed from skeptical to calculating as profit projections appeared on screens, their questions shifting from technical validation to market exclusivity and patent protection. One council member remained after the others departed, a woman whose subtle authority registered in how even West deferred slightly in her presence. Your mother would be proud, she stated, studying Rose with eyes that carried decades of sharp observation. Caroline always had exceptional analytical skills beneath her rebellious exterior. The comment disoriented Rose more than any security threat could have, this casual reference to a mother whose life story suddenly seemed constructed rather than lived. You knew her? She asked, struggling to maintain professional composure while personal foundations shifted beneath her. I arranged her scholarship to UCLA after we confirmed Anthony's death, the woman replied, her gaze traveling to West with what appeared to be decades-old disapproval. Robert's protection methods were too restrictive for her independent nature, so we compromised with distance and monitoring instead. West accepted this criticism with a slight inclination of his head, neither defending nor denying the accusation. Monica has overseen family security protocols since before you were born, he explained to Rose, the first acknowledgement that her mother's freedom had been an illusion, carefully maintained by invisible watchers. The revelation collapsed Rose's perception of her past like a house of cards, each memory now requiring re-examination through the lens of orchestrated surveillance. You've been watching me my entire life, she stated, the words falling between them like stones into still water. Protection requires awareness, Monica replied with unapologetic pragmatism, gathering her files with the efficiency of someone who had managed dangerous truths for decades. The West bloodline has always attracted attention from competitors, law enforcement, and opportunists alike. Rose found herself at the laboratory hours later, seeking refuge in the objectivity of chemical analysis while processing the knowledge that her life's narrative had never been truly her own. The perfume formula, nearly complete on her workstation, now represented not just her grandmother's legacy, but a family history written in molecular structures rather than words. 3 months into her new reality, Rose found herself alone with West on the estate's rooftop terrace, the evening sky painted in watercolor hues of purple and gold. The city sprawled before them like a galaxy of earthbound stars, beautiful and distant from their elevated perspective. Your grandmother recognized me today, West revealed, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass as he leaned against the railing. She called me Little Robbie and asked if I was still collecting baseball cards like when Anthony and I were boys. Rose studied his profile against the darkening skyline, noting the momentary vulnerability that flickered across features usually guarded by calculated control. She mentioned a summer house by a lake this morning, she offered, this exchange of personal details becoming their unspoken ritual. Their conversations had evolved into something neither had anticipated, moments of genuine connection between two people orbiting the same complicated legacy. West shared stories of her grandfather that humanized the myth, painting Anthony as brilliant but flawed, principled yet pragmatic in ways that sometimes contradicted his ethical framework. He would have given everything up for your grandmother, West confided, his voice softening when he spoke of his brother. Anthony was planning our family's legitimate transition before his death: pharmaceuticals, medical research, technology ventures without criminal entanglements. The revelation aligned with the research innovations Rose had witnessed within the organization, legitimate businesses built atop a foundation of historical criminality. Yet you maintained both worlds after his death, she observed, neither accusation nor approval coloring her words. West's expression hardened momentarily, then settled into something more complex. Resignation tinged with pragmatism. Legitimacy requires time and protection during the transition, he explained, gesturing toward the city below. The underworld doesn't simply release its participants without consequence. Rose considered the empire she'd glimpsed during her months inside, the pharmaceutical research changing lives, the charitable foundations funding education in underserved communities, existing alongside operations she deliberately avoided knowing about. How much of the business remains in shadow? She asked, testing boundaries that had gradually become more permeable. Less each year, West admitted, surprising her with his candor. Anthony's vision takes time, but his son continues what he started, building our legal holdings, dismantling the old structures that once seemed necessary for survival. The mention of Anthony's son, a cousin she'd never known existed, sent a jolt of surprise through Rose that must have registered on her face. Paul manages our European operations, West elaborated, watching her reaction carefully. He doesn't know about you yet. We thought one family revelation at a time was sufficient. A cool breeze swept across the terrace, carrying the distant sounds of the city below as Rose processed this new branch of her family tree. When do I meet him? She asked, the question emerging naturally, as if accepting her place within this complicated dynasty. He arrives next week for the quarterly review, West replied, his tone carrying subtle approval of her response. Paul has Anthony's scientific mind. He'll appreciate the breakthrough you've achieved with the memory compound. Their conversation shifted to the neurochemical applications of her research, the potential for treating degenerative conditions beyond Alzheimer's, possibilities that extended far beyond the original perfume recreation. West listened with genuine interest, occasionally offering insights that revealed sophisticated understanding of pharmaceutical markets and regulatory pathways. As night fully claimed the sky, Rose realized how comfortably they had settled into this unexpected kinship, neither fully trusting, yet both recognizing the unbreakable connection of shared blood and complementary abilities. We make a formidable team, don't we? She observed, the words escaping before she could examine their implications. West's rare smile transformed his features, briefly revealing the younger brother who had admired Anthony rather than the criminal empire's architect. More formidable than our competitors realize, he agreed, raising his glass in acknowledgement of their evolving alliance. Evelyn's condition improved dramatically over the following weeks, the experimental treatment protocol showing results that defied conventional medical prognosis. She began recalling specific details from her marriage to Anthony, describing their hideaway cottage in the mountains where they'd planned to raise their child away from family business entanglements. He promised we would disappear completely once the transition was complete, Evelyn confided during Rose's daily visit, clarity shining in eyes that had been clouded for years. Anthony had evidence files hidden away as insurance while he worked to separate legitimate businesses from the rest. The revelation sent Rose back to West with questions that risked the delicate trust they'd established. My grandmother mentioned insurance files, she stated without preamble, finding him in his study reviewing security protocols. Did you ever locate them after his death? West's expression remained neutral, but his fingers stilled over the documents, the momentary pause speaking volumes. We found partial records, he admitted, studying her with renewed calculation. Anthony compartmentalized information. No single person had complete access. Paul West's arrival at the estate shifted the family dynamic in unexpected ways, his scientific background creating immediate connection with Rose, while his operational expertise complemented his uncle's strategic vision. Tall and lean with Anthony's features softened by his mother's influence, Paul carried himself with quiet confidence, rather than the intimidating presence his uncle cultivated. The family dinner that evening revealed another layer of the West dynamic. Paul's ability to navigate his uncle's intensity with diplomatic precision born of years bridging European elegance and American pragmatism. He shared stories of pharmaceutical innovations from Swiss laboratories while subtly steering conversations away from business sectors Rose suspected remained in legal gray areas. My father's journals mentioned your mother frequently, Paul confided later, as they walked through the estate's gardens, moonlight silvering pathways between carefully tended roses. He wrote that Caroline inherited his stubbornness, but your grandmother's unwavering moral compass, traits I see reflected in your approach to our research. This unexpected connection to her mother through Anthony's documentation stirred complex emotions in Rose, questions about nature versus nurture, about how much of her scientific intuition and ethical framework might be inherited rather than developed. She wondered what other insights about herself might exist in family records she had yet to access. Your memory compound could revolutionize cognitive treatment protocols across multiple conditions, he observed during their first laboratory meeting, reviewing her research with professional appreciation. The pharmaceutical applications extend far beyond our initial projections. Rose discovered in Paul a kindred scientific mind, their discussions flowing easily between technical challenges and ethical considerations of their research. Unlike his uncle, Paul spoke openly about the family's transition toward legitimacy, his European education having shaped his perspective on business ethics and corporate responsibility. "Uncle Robert has accelerated the timeline since your arrival," Paul revealed during a late-night research session, their shared focus on neurological data creating an environment of candor. "Your work provides the breakthrough innovation we need for the legitimate pharmaceutical division to eclipse the remaining shadow operations." The revelation that her research formed a critical component of the family's transformation strategy both flattered and unsettled Rose. "He never mentioned that my work would determine the transition timeline," she noted, uncertain whether she felt manipulated or valued. Paul's expression softened with understanding that suggested he'd navigated similar realizations about his uncle's strategic methods. "Robert operates on need-to-know principles, a survival habit he hasn't outgrown despite the changing landscape," he explained, his tone neither defensive nor apologetic. Evelyn's health took an unexpected downturn the following week, her cognitive improvements plateauing before beginning a gradual decline that Dr. Pearson struggled to explain. The medical team increased treatment protocols, adjusting compound concentrations while running additional diagnostics to identify the regression cause. "The enhanced neural pathways are deteriorating despite continued treatment," Dr. Pearson reported during an emergency consultation, frustration evident in her usually composed demeanor. "It's as if the memories themselves are fighting to remain hidden again." Rose spent sleepless nights in the laboratory, reviewing molecular structures and interaction patterns for answers that continued to elude her. The perfume formula, now completely reverse-engineered, revealed nothing new despite additional testing on isolated neural tissue samples. West found her there one morning, surrounded by failed simulation models and discarded hypotheses. "You need perspective," he stated simply, placing a leather-bound journal before her. Anthony documented his observations of the original perfumer's work, notes I should have shared sooner. The journal contained meticulous documentation of chemical trials, botanical extraction methods, and, most critically, behavioral observations of test subjects exposed to various formula iterations. Anthony had noted similar regression patterns in early trials, attributing them to psychological resistance toward painful memories resurfacing during treatment. Rose read the passage twice, a hypothesis forming that combined chemical interactions with psychological defense mechanisms. "It's not the compound failing," she explained to West, understanding crystallizing with sudden clarity. "Her mind is protecting itself from memories that cause emotional distress." 3 days before the scheduled pharmaceutical division launch, Rose sat beside her grandmother's bed, monitoring vital signs that had stabilized, but showed no improvement. Evelyn drifted between clarity and confusion, occasionally gripping Rose's hand with surprising strength when lucidity returned. "He didn't want you in this life," Evelyn whispered during one such moment, her gaze intense with urgency. "Anthony created escape routes for all of us. Documentation in the cottage safe behind the painting of mountains at sunrise." The information electrified Rose, but she maintained calm composure as she stroked her grandmother's hand. "Which cottage, grandmother?" she asked gently, conscious that this moment of clarity might quickly pass. "Where should I look for these documents?" West appeared in the doorway before Evelyn could answer, his expression revealing nothing as he observed their interaction. "The board members have arrived early for tomorrow's presentation," he announced, his tone professionally neutral. "Your presence is requested in the main conference room." Rose reluctantly left her grandmother's side, following West through corridors that no longer seemed labyrinthine but familiar. Their working relationship had evolved into a complex balance of professional respect, familial connection, and carefully maintained boundaries regarding certain operations she still wasn't privy to. The conference room housed pharmaceutical industry leaders, regulatory consultants, and investment partners gathered for the official unveiling of their memory compound. Rose recognized several faces from medical journals and financial publications, legitimate business figures whose presence signified the West family's emerging position in above-board enterprise. "Dr. Carter will present the neurological applications of compound W137, West announced, using Rose's maternal surname for this audience while subtly acknowledging her contribution with the compound designation. "Her groundbreaking research represents the cornerstone of our pharmaceutical division's future direction." Rose delivered her presentation with confident precision, the months of intensive research evident in her command of the material. She outlined treatment protocols, clinical trial projections, and potential applications across multiple degenerative conditions, carefully omitting the compound's origins in a family perfume signature. The board chairman, a distinguished neuroscientist with impeccable credentials, leaned forward during her explanation of synapse regeneration patterns. This approach represents a paradigm shift in cognitive treatment, he acknowledged, his academic skepticism yielding to evident excitement. The implications for early intervention protocols could transform standard care practices industry-wide. Behind the professional discussions, Rose recognized the watchful assessment from West's inner circle, family associates evaluating not just her research, but her potential as a permanent fixture in their carefully balanced power structure. Their guarded acceptance manifested in subtle ways, questions directed to her rather than West, business cards exchanged with genuine interest, invitations to exclusive medical conferences where connections transcended scientific collaboration. A silver-haired woman Rose recognized as West's financial strategist approached during the brief reception afterward, offering a crystal flute of champagne with practiced grace. "You've accomplished something remarkable," she observed, her tone carrying the weight of someone who rarely offered praise. "Creating the cornerstone for legitimate family legacy while honoring your grandfather's original vision. Few could navigate that balance so effectively." Questions from the assembled experts revealed genuine interest rather than skepticism, their engagement suggesting potential partnerships that would further legitimize the West pharmaceutical enterprise. Rose fielded technical inquiries with expertise that visibly impressed even the most established neurological researchers in attendance. "Your grandmother is asking for you," Paul whispered when she returned to her seat, passing her a note with Evelyn's room number circled in red. "Dr. Pearson reports increased agitation and insistence on speaking with you immediately." West nodded almost imperceptibly when Rose caught his eye, permission granted to leave this crucial business meeting for family concerns. The gesture, small but significant, demonstrated evolving priorities that placed Evelyn's well-being above corporate impression management. Rose found her grandmother sitting upright, more alert than she'd been in days, with a small velvet pouch clutched in her hand. "The mountain sunrise," Evelyn stated without preamble, pressing the pouch into Rose's palm. "Anthony always said true freedom requires complete information." Inside the pouch lay a memory stick and a small key, unremarkable objects that Evelyn guarded with fierce determination. "When the time comes to choose your path," she whispered, eyes suddenly clear and focused, "remember that loyalty to conscience outweighs loyalty to blood." The door opened as Evelyn finished speaking, West entering with quiet authority that suggested routine visit rather than strategic interruption. "How are you feeling today, Evelyn?" he asked, his tone gentler than his customary business cadence, as he moved to stand beside Rose. "Strong enough to see clearly, Robert," Evelyn replied, her gaze unflinching as it moved between uncle and niece. "Strong enough to recognize when history threatens to repeat itself through a new generation." West's expression remained carefully neutral, though Rose detected subtle tension in his posture. "The past informs, but doesn't dictate our future choices," he responded, placing his hand lightly on Rose's shoulder in a gesture that felt both supportive and possessive. Rose felt the weight of the memory stick in her pocket, understanding that it represented an alternate path, perhaps the evidence files her grandfather had hidden, possibly the freedom her grandmother had sacrificed everything to provide. The choice between family loyalty and independent conscience crystallized in that moment, unspoken but undeniable. Later that evening, as sunset bathed the estate in golden light, Rose stood in her laboratory surrounded by her completed research, the perfume formula perfectly recreated, the memory compound refined for pharmaceutical application. The family signature that had once marked only those under West protection would soon help thousands suffering from cognitive decline. West joined her as darkness fell, his silhouette framed in the doorway like a boundary between worlds she might choose. "The board unanimously approved production," he announced, satisfaction evident in his typically controlled voice. "Your work will establish our legitimate legacy more firmly than anything since Anthony's original vision." Rose nodded, understanding that her scientific contribution had become the bridge between the West family's shadowed past and its potential future in legitimate enterprise. The perfume bottle that had started this journey sat on her workstation, its contents now replicated in pharmaceutical-grade precision. With deliberate care, Rose lifted the original bottle, inhaling the scent that had altered her destiny 3 months earlier. "I've been thinking about my role going forward," she stated, meeting West's gaze with newfound certainty about how I can honor both my grandfather's vision and my own principles. West studied her with the evaluating gaze she'd come to recognize, calculating possibilities, assessing intentions, weighing potential against risk. "And what conclusion have you reached?" he asked, his tone revealing genuine interest in her decision rather than predetermined expectation. "That transformation requires both preservation and evolution," Rose replied, gesturing toward the perfume and the medical research it had spawned. "I'll oversee the pharmaceutical division with Paul, maintaining the legitimate legacy while ensuring the remaining operations continue their transition away from the shadows." The choice settled between them like a contract written in invisible ink, binding without constraining, acknowledging the complex reality of family ties that could neither be fully embraced nor completely severed. Rose understood that the memory stick remained her insurance, much as Anthony's files had once been his, protection ensuring her voice would carry weight in the family's evolving story. "Anthony would be proud," West said finally, the closest he'd come to expressing genuine emotion about her integration into the family enterprise. "You have his scientific brilliance and your grandmother's moral compass, a powerful combination for the future we're building. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is crucial for me to continue creating content here.